morning, friends and subscribers, all 8 of you. This is Radical Motherhood. This is a blog about being a mom in today's culture and trying to be the kind of mom that Jesus has called us to be, despite all of the influences and messages that we get kind of to the contrary, trying to convince us, to live our lives a different way. So, part of being a radical mom is trying to spread encouragement and support and love and joy to all of the other moms out there who, like me and my sister, who is also part of this blog, really sometimes struggle with what we're doing and what we're called to do, and doing it with joy and doing it with a willing, happy heart. And I thought I'd do just kind of a day in the life video here. Just me going about my regular, boring, ordinary thing. But also talk about a book that I just finished and how this book is really inspiring, I guess, especially in the role as a stay-at-home mom. So here we go. We're getting started. This is me doing dishes in the morning. You can see we don't have our dishwasher right now because it just decided to quit. And I'm going to be making my bed and homeschooling and doing all kinds of stuff. So just enjoy watching, and I'll try to make the talking as interesting as I can here. So the book I just finished is called Spiritual Direction by Henry Nouwen. And it actually is a book that was compiled after his death. So he didn't write the book from start to finish with the intention of it being published as one document, but it's a cool book and I highly recommend it. The author was a Catholic priest, but he was also a professor and a really well-known speaker and writer. He taught at Notre Dame and Yale and Harvard, and he traveled all over giving talks and helping people and giving people spiritual direction. And kind of at the height of his career, he felt called to leave everything and move to France and work in a community for disabled adults. So he kind of gave everything up for this group of people who, to a lot of other people, are just nobody. And he was no longer in the spotlight at all. He was kind of secluded, and the only people he interacted with were these adults who just depended on him for everything, but couldn't necessarily give him anything, worldly value in return. So I thought there was a big parallel there between what he did and what a lot of us do as stay-at-home moms. So I didn't necessarily leave any big, wonderful, fancy career to be a stay-at-home mom, but I did leave a job that I enjoyed, and I got to interact with a lot of interesting people and travel to a lot of interesting places and, get praised a lot for being smart and doing things well. And that's something that, for me, was a big loss when I went home to stay home with my kids, because as you guys know, kids aren't really into that. They aren't really into praising you. You don't really get to get thanks for all of the amazing things that you do, and you don't get to travel, and you don't get to hang out with adults and talk about adult things all day. And so, a lot of us didn't give up a professorship at an Ivy League school, but I think we can still relate to the reality of sacrificing something for what we think is a greater good, and for what I think is definitely a greater good, something that is our life's calling, much more so than any career. So one of the things, Henry Nouwen kind of has two different concepts that he goes over in just like a couple pages of this book, but they really spoke to me. So the two terms that he talked about in this little section were downward mobility and voluntary displacement. So downward mobility, I'm sure most of you guys have heard of the term upward mobility, and it's something that today, especially in American, North American, United States culture, values is the idea of always moving up, always, getting a better job, more money, a bigger house, better cars, more stuff, um, always striving to get more and be more and do more and have more. And you can it can be a lot of pressure, and it can really be distracting from the the things that really matter. Because if you think about motherhood and parenting and being a stay-at-home mom, it's not upwardly mobile. It's what Henry Nouwen calls downward mobility. And it's the path that Jesus took. Here he is God. And it's certainly a downward step to become man, and then to die the death of a criminal, to live your whole life really in obscurity. Um, it's a lot like what I think being a stay-at-home mom is. You choose, he says, it's going to the end of the line, staying behind the sets, and choosing the last place. He says we are called to follow Jesus on the downward path of ministry and to go where God is leading, even if that place is somewhere we would rather not go. So, what we're choosing when we're a stay-at-home mom is to step back and say, this life is not about me, and it's not about what I can get and what I can achieve and how much success I can have in the eyes of other people. It's about serving. And it's not just about serving, it's about serving these little people who really have nothing to offer us in the eyes of the world in return. They love us and they depend on us and they need us, but we're not going to become famous by serving our children. We're not going to earn a lot of money. We're not going to get a lot of praise or thanks. So I think it's hard in today's world to choose to do work that is, number one, unpaid, and number two, unseen. It's something that happens in the privacy of your own home for the most part, and it's just very different from what we are taught to want for our lives. Voluntary displacement is a similar kind of idea to downward mobility, and it basically means that we're choosing voluntarily to leave what he calls the net of the ordinary and proper. So to leave the ordinary and proper, meaning to do what isn't expected of you. And when a woman leaves a good job, especially maybe one that took years of education and training and work to earn, we see it kind of as a violation of what is ordinary and proper. How could she waste all that time? How could she waste all that money? What kind of example is she setting? Aren't women like her, like me, like you maybe, destroying the feminist movement? And what are we doing to our kids? Wouldn't they be more normal if they were in daycare or if they were in school all day? So when you're doing what we're doing here as a stay-at-home mom or a homeschooling mom is really kind of radical, and it's uncomfortable and it's hard. So I just want to encourage anyone out there who is a stay-at-home mom or is thinking about being a stay-at-home mom that, the measure of whether something is a good idea or the right thing for you to do should not be, whether anyone else we know is doing it or whether our culture endorses it. It should be about what God is calling us to do and what God has said in His Word and through the church, what we're expected to do in this life. So I think that most of us aren't called to riches or fame or a high-powered career, especially not after we become mothers. It really is a choice between wanting what the world wants and wanting what God wants. And I think that what we're called to is to know God and to love Him and to recognize that without Him, we are nothing. Literally nothing. If He were not there supporting us every second of the day, we would just vanish. So we stay behind the sets. We take the last place in line. We admit to our limitations and powerlessness. And it's always going to be a struggle, sometimes anyway, to renounce what the world has to offer. It's easy to focus on what we could have had or what we could have been. Even when we know that none of that is what really matters, it's a daily struggle. And the only way to embrace the downward path is to ask Jesus to help us lay down our lives for what we know He has called us to do. And then we can live our ordinary lives with extraordinary joy.